All right, so we're going to talk about becoming a Red Cross community shelter team. And it's a community shelter team. The word community is in there because you're in the community sheltering the local community. And at Red Cross, because the Red Cross will do the training, do background checks and liability, and pay for all costs involved in the sheltering operations. So we're going to talk about what a Red Cross, what it means to be a Red Cross community shelter team. Who can participate? When might we open a shelter? How to open the shelter? Who will serve in the shelter? And what will be the role of different people and the team members? And of course, how will the Red Cross support that effort? Are you on all by yourself, or do you have support? We'll let you. So our mission, the American Red Cross, again, it prevents and alleviates human suffering in the face of emergency by mobilizing the power of volunteers and the generosity of donors. And it's really that power of volunteers. It's the Red Cross responsibility, again, self-imposed, that we advocate and make sure for the safety and the comfort of those displaced by a disaster. And we do that by working with the community, working with many groups of people and other organizations and churches, including as well as emergency management and government entities. Again, it's to ensure the safety of all shelter workers and residents. Each community shelter team member must pass a background check. And again, that's paid for by the Red Cross. But just need to know that up front, that there is a background check. Obviously, you're dealing with children and elderly and those type of things, so we want to make sure that not only the shelter workers, but the shelter residents are safe. Choosing a shelter facility, again, we look at the location to the incident, so where people are being evacuated from. We want it to be relatively close to that, but far enough away that it's out of disaster, particularly here with wildfires. We don't want to have to pick up the shelter several times because we're running away from the fire as it's moving forward. So we try our best to make sure that the shelter location is determined once, and so we're not moving people around. Okay, so activating a shelter. Community facility is chosen, and then the shelter needs to be open. So the team, your team leader would be contacted by the Red Cross. Let them know what's going on, what we need. That team leader would then alert the team, gather people together, and get out there to open the shelter. We ask that to open and run a shelter, you need at least 5 people. We're asking teams consist of 15 to 20 people because again, not everybody's available all the time. People get sick, people work, people go on vacation, that kind of thing. And so the shelter team members, there's 5 really duties, if you will, or positions in a shelter team, and that is shelter management, and we'll talk about what each of these folks do. So shelter management, registration and of the shelter residents, which is very important, feeding, of course, logistics, moving stuff and getting it all set up, and then dormitory management, which again, of course, is important. If you do all those things properly, you have a wonderful experience. If it's not done properly, it can be a real nightmare. So that's why we do extensive training and talk about each of these things. So shelter management, what does that mean? So when a shelter is open, an inspection initially needs to take place. So we walk through, take inventory of all the supplies, all the paper goods, any food, anything, all the tables and chairs, any damage is noted. All of those kind of things to make sure that we replace everything before we leave. It oversees the shelter setup and all the shelter activities. Again, there needs to be a leader coordinating all of those things, and that's what a shelter manager does. Communicate closely with the American Red Cross to make sure that we understand what's going on and that all the resources are there, and then of course to give any technical guidance that you may need. Hold residents briefings. It's very important. People that have been displaced or involved in a disaster want information, right? Even if there's no new information, you want to make sure that you have a regular scheduled briefing just to let them know what's new, what isn't new, whatever, because people, as all of us, we want to know what's going on, right? So we want to make sure that we schedule those. You track expenses, very important. Just even in the throes of it, if you have to buy some things quickly and whatever, that's fine. Just to make sure you keep all the receipts, and we can work out the details later. But keep the receipts, because the Red Cross does pay for if the shelter is requested or opened by the Red Cross under the direction of the Red Cross, then we assume all expenses. Okay. Enforce the 3 R's, which is rules, respect, and routine. Very important to do up front, kind of be a bit of a taskmaster up front. So if there are rules, because you're bringing in people from the community, from all walks of life, that don't know each other, and you're putting them all in one room, so and they think it's their home, and I might act differently in my home than you act in your home, and so you have all of that. So there needs to be clear rules posted. There needs to be a clear schedule of events and those type of things to make sure that there is order and everything goes smoothly. Okay, let's see here. The registration, which is the second position, registration of shelter residents. You record the resident information. We have a standard registration form. On that form, it helps kind of assess their needs, right? So we want to understand exactly what, obviously they need housing, but what are their other needs, so that we can collect that information and make sure that we get our resources, and that we talk to other community groups to make sure that their resources are all mobilized to make sure that we're hitting those needs in the days or weeks to follow, whatever makes sense. And then refer to other services. Again, we'll have that opportunity to bring in other groups that serve the community in a disaster and the different needs. And then again, you would review those 3 R's, routine, respect, and the rules. Feeding. Feeding is very important. Snacks and water up front, right? As soon as people walk in the door. What do they do when you get on a plane? They give you a little pack of peanuts and something to drink just to shut you up, right? Otherwise, people are going to get nervous. So you got to put something in your mouth. So that's exactly what this is. It gives comfort to people that are going through stress. It gives them something to do. And there's some activity, and again, gives them a sense that someone cares about them. And going through a disaster is very stressful, as you might imagine. So snacks and water as quickly as possible. We provide catered meals, meaning either restaurants or industrial kitchens. The Red Cross will pick up that food and take it and deliver it to the shelter locations. If the power's out, where are we getting the food? We'll drive it from somewhere that has food. We do have many caterers that have barbecues and those kind of things. We also have a stash of, between us and emergency management, of heater meals, which again are those self-stable meals to get us through a couple of meals before we, hopefully the power comes back on, but if not, then we do have, the Southern Baptist, for example, have a couple of trailers up in Orange County, Riverside, San Bernardino, up there. We work very closely with the Southern Baptist. They have these huge tractor trailers that kind of unfold into these industrial kitchens, can serve 8,000 meals a day out of one of those, with propane and whatnot. So we are prepared for that. There is a plan. Good question. Any preparation on site, again, might be to just assemble that meal. Again, it would be to make sure that the plates and silverware and napkins and all of those kind of things. Or it might be completely prepped by the partner with kind of a doggy bag type of a thing going on. And then a schedule. Want to make sure, again, this feeding person would order the number of lunches they need at breakfast, the number of dinner meals they need at lunch, etc., that kind of thing. Logistics is setting up the registration, post signage everywhere. We want to make sure that people know where to find that location. So everything out to the major road, all the way into the building. Where do they walk into the building? Where are their handicapped accessible entrances? What are the rules? What time is the shelter closing at a certain date? All those kind of things want to be posted, so it's very, very clear. Nobody has any questions. So you can't put too much signage. And we have the signage kits, the teams would have all of that good stuff in there. Setting up the feeding. Again, a feeding area separate from the dormitory area. Setting up the dormitory area. Back to logistics person, so acquiring the supplies. So the comfort kits, any extra cots, the fruit, all that kind of stuff needs to go through the logistics. Cleaning up, cots all need to be cleaned and put away at the end of the day. And all of these things you kind of have a workforce to help you do all of this. And where would that workforce come from? Well, volunteers, absolutely. But the residents, you got a room full of 100, 200 people. You put them to work. They got nothing to do. They're just sitting there. So give them something so they don't have to dwell on their disaster. So dormitory management. We want a dormitory management person that establishes a floor plan, looking at gender, looking at families and separating those. Also, to talk about cultural sensitivities. Muslim women, for example, cannot get dressed in front of men. Those types, dividers and those type of things would be appropriate. So thinking about those kind of nuances. Meal times and location. Again, you want to work with that. The lights out time, again, it needs to be scheduled. Lights out at 10 o'clock. It's quiet at 10, lights out at 11, or whatever's appropriate. Shower schedules. Again, if you have a room for 200 people and you have 2 showers, you got to kind of schedule that a little bit. Children's activities, very important. If you lock a bunch of kids in a big cultural hall like this with nothing for them to do, what's going to happen? Right? So, but we also we work very closely with Children's Disaster Services, with the Church of the Brethren, and they are happy to come and train you folks as well, to what to do with children or how to care for children in a disaster situation. They're just wonderful at that. Information updates. Again, to give them as much information as you have. And cleanup duties. Again, it's just like children, right? You got to make sure you clean your room, you clean around your cot, you keep your stuff under your bed there, all that kind of stuff. And then enforce the rules. Again, the more of the rules you have and keep them, the better and more smoothly the shelter goes. These are, next couple of slides are just for things that would be nice. So this is above the 5 positions, but if you have anybody in health services, you have anybody on your team that is an EMT, obviously any licensed professional, nurse, doctor, those type of things, that would be very helpful, and we have some training for how to do that in a Red Cross shelter. Functional access needs. All evacuees are welcome in a congregate shelter, which would be a Red Cross shelter. So anybody that can help with that, the daily care of daily activities of living, like getting up and down and those kind of things, would be helpful to have some of those folks. Again, if you don't have either the functional access needs capability or the health services, those will be sent by the Red Cross to support. What about nursing home and assisted living residents? So if a nursing home or assisted living center is evacuated, it is by law, that organization needs to provide the same care to those individuals, the residents, that they did at the resident home. So they need to bring their caretakers with them to a shelter. Okay, our primary goal, again, is to take care of residents, take care of people that have lost everything, right? And it's typically no notice. We have large apartment buildings, wildfires, all of those type of things. You're really helping people through the worst day of their life, and that's what sheltering is doing. It's just giving people dignity, giving them a safe place to be, making sure that they're eating, helping them, comfort them. So if that's just talking with them, if that's bringing in, we have disaster mental health folks that are licensed professional that can help with emotional counseling, that type of thing. We have spiritual care folks that can help guide people or comfort folks in their faith. And that's the focal point of all that is the shelter. The need for shelter teams is great. We have all the stuff. We have the buildings, we have 16,000 cots, 20,000 blankets, et cetera, et cetera. We have all that stuff. We're well planned, we're well resourced in San Diego County. What we don't have is the people. We don't have the capacity right now to open many shelters. Not as many as we would need in a 2007 wildfire scenario, for example. So we're really looking for the shelter teams. This is what a shelter team looks like. This is what it is. What we're looking for are wards or stakes to form Red Cross community shelter teams. We would train. The training is relatively easy. There's disaster service overview, so it kind of says this is the Red Cross, this is our, our fundamental principles, etc. There's shelter fundamentals, which goes through sheltering, and then caring for those with functional and access needs. We also have a course for shelter managers on top of that. But the whole thing's about 6 to 8 hours. We can do that nights, weekends, all that kind of stuff. And then we have a progressive kind of training and exercise program. So once a year, maybe twice a year, we'll have tabletop exercises and a functional exercise where we'll break out a cot. How do you put this thing together? That kind of stuff. Right now, we just did an analysis and put together our kind of 15 top shelters, locations, facilities, if they're available. So this is a perfect scenario. Right now we have about 15,000 capacity to shelter 15,000 people with 15 facilities throughout the county.